A federal plan to deport massive amounts of illegal migrants having an impact here in New York. We'll hear from an immigration expert on what people are experiencing in their interactions with ICE. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie Deline. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE for short, ramping up arrests of undocumented immigrants this week.
This is all part of a campaign promise President Trump made to crack down on illegal immigration.
The raids conducted by ICE happening this week in New York City, according to law enforcement, saying one operation early in the week resulted in at least 30 people being arrested in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Queens. The people targeted in these raids are suspected criminals wanted for serious crimes ranging from drug charges to gun trafficking.
Here's a breakdown of the numbers now according to the recent data. ICE arrests have risen since Trump's inauguration, and they've jumped in just the last few days. The red line behind me, what that does is that represents the average number of arrests per day in President Biden's last full fiscal year in office, about 310 over the last few days there. Now, there's also been around 1,000 arrests each day. By Thursday of this week, roughly 40,000 migrants so far have been detained.
As these deportations go on, the governor and attorney general releasing guidance to schools, reminding them of the measures they can take to safeguard the rights of immigrant students. Here are a few highlights. All children ages 5 to 21 are entitled to free public education regardless of their immigration status. Additionally, schools are not able to provide a student's personal information to law enforcement, including their immigration status, without parental consent. And a final item, law enforcement cannot remove students from school grounds or interrogate a student without the consent of the parent.
To get some more insight on the ongoing ICE deportations, we are joined once again by attorney Sienna Friedman Tolbert, immigration lawyer with Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna. Sienna, thanks for coming in, because we know this must be a busy time for you. Is the phone ringing off the hook?
Oh, it's ringing off the hook. People are very afraid. There is definitely an atmosphere of fear going around right now. Among employers, it's happening with employers, and it's happening in the communities as well.
So the asylum seekers who came to New York, they were bussed up here, they went through the paperwork, they, were here legally. Has their status changed at all?
No, so actually most of them now have a work permit, authorization to work. So most of them are working, they're looking for housing. They're currently in pending status because they have asylum cases pending, or they're in immigration court and they have immigration court pending. So they are in a good position, so to speak, but they're still worried. What does this mean? Will I be stopped? Will I be questioned? What will happen when I'm stopped and questioned? So I think that's more of what people are concerned about.
It's part of the issue too. I wanted to watch the White House press secretary's first briefing just to see how she did. Of course, the immigration comes up, and I forget which reporter it was. It might have been somebody from another network who said, of the people who ICE is grabbing, how many are criminals versus people who just are here? And the answer was, well, they're all here illegally, so they're all breaking the law. How do you parse that? Because the spokesperson made it sound like they can just grab anybody if they can't show they're a citizen, and there's got to be some difference, right?
Yeah, there's different levels, right? And so that's what we're trying to figure out, who are they going to take. Right now, what we're hearing is that they have quotas, and so that incentivizes the ICE officers to grab as many people as they can. When you have a quota that you have to reach every day, have a certain amount of people that you have to round up. Reportedly, out of the most recent Chicago raids, they're saying over half of them were individuals who do not have criminal histories. But as you said, just by being in the country, if you entered without inspection, is that what they're considering a crime? So that's kind of the conversation that individuals are having, whether or not they're considering that a crime or not.
So New York City is a sanctuary city. How does that play a role in all of this?
So what that means is they have to determine the level of how they're going to cooperate. The local law enforcement is going to cooperate with federal agencies. It has always been the case throughout the Obama administration, the Biden administration, that law enforcement will always turn over individuals who have violent backgrounds. If an immigrant is detained, they have a felony or a violent misdemeanor, they will always turn them over to immigration to go to immigration court and to be removed from the country. But now we have to figure out, what level are we turning people over? If you stop someone on the side of the street for a speeding ticket, is law enforcement bringing them back to the station, doing their biometrics and calling ICE? That's where we have to figure out what's going to happen in New York City.
What about the so-called dreamers? I don't know if it's a general term we can throw out there, but for a decade, 15 years, I've heard about individuals who came 20 years ago, and they were some of them came as children, now they're adults, they're working, they're trying to get a legal status. Are they being put in the same basket as everybody else, where somebody could be here 25 years But like you said, they get a speeding ticket and they run their name and say, wait a second, this person's not in the system. Are they in the same boat?
They are in the same boat, right? They're going to be, right, all of them have work authorization to work here in the US, but all of them are in a deferred status. So they don't technically have a lawful status here in the US. So the question is, what happens with them? Right now, the administration says that they want to protect them. So we're hoping that they will be protected and that if they're detained or run their biometrics, they'll see that they're here under DACA and they'll allow them to remain. But we're just waiting to see what those policies are going to be. You have to understand, they're just ramping up. This is just the beginning stages. Right now, they're doing very targeted raids. We expect that it's going to get more intense as the weeks progress because now they'll figure out places to put individuals when they detain them. Right now, they're still figuring out the logistics of all this, so we're still in early days. But in upcoming weeks, next several weeks, it's going to increase exponentially once they have a place to put individuals.
So if ICE comes to your door, what should you do?
If ICE comes to your door, you have the right to ask them for a warrant. If they have a valid search warrant signed by a judge, then you have to let them in. But if they don't have that, you can respectfully say, I don't have to answer your questions. I'm going to call my attorney or I'm going to contact someone else so they can help me. Someone from a nonprofit that specializes in this. Call someone and just say respectfully, I just need more information so I can figure out what's going on here.
Is it fair to say, even through a closed door, look, if you have a warrant, slide under the door or show it to me or put it through the window? Because once you open that door now...
Exactly. You should have them slide it or slide them through a crack in the door or what have you. If they have a valid warrant, you look at it. If the warrant is valid, signed by a judge, you have to let them in. But if not, you can close the door and say, I hear you're outside. I'm going to call my attorney and see what we can do for you.
And I know earlier you mentioned employers are concerned. Can you elaborate on that and what are they asking you?
Well, a lot of employers are concerned about worksite visits. What happens if ICE shows up at the worksite? What are our rights? And so we're informing them about the similar rights. If they don't have a valid search warrant, you shouldn't allow them to just wander around your workplace. You should ask them how you can help them, what are they looking for. If they're there to validate that all your workers are working with authorization, you have the right to call your attorney and prepare those documents for them in a timely fashion. So there is a system to this, and everyone just needs to know more about what the proper procedure is.
And last question, and we mentioned it before you came on in this show, schools, there's also rules. They can't just go into a school, grab a kid and take them out without the parents' permission and start questioning children, right?
Yeah, so what happened was they revoked that sensitive locations memorandum, which prohibited or highly frowned upon ICE officers going to sensitive locations like schools, churches, hospitals. That has been revoked. And so that kind of put the red flag up for everybody. So what happens if they show up? Well, it's the same situation. You don't want ICE officers walking around your schools. You should have a procedure in place. If they come to the door, you should have the representative stop them and say, 1 second, let me contact someone in our general counsel's office or the proper individual, and then we'll go from there.
And legal citizen, not legal citizen, you still have a right to remain silent.
You always have a right to remain silent. You're 100% right.
Which sometimes might be the best answer to a
Might
lot
be
of
the
this.
best answer. If you have enough courage, do it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Sienna Freeman Tolbert, attorney in Albany. If you're looking for a good immigration lawyer, that's the person right there. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Prison reform at the top of mind for many in Albany following the death of Robert Brooks at the Marcy Correctional Facility. When we come back, we're going to hear from the Correctional Association of New York on proposed prison reforms, details of the changes they would really like to see.
If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X at WTEN.
Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. The conversation surrounding prison reform continues to develop following the death of Robert Brooks at Marcy Correctional Facility.
3 bills have been introduced, which one lawyer argues would have made it possible for Robert Brooks to still be alive today if they were already law.
Let's take a look. The first bill would enable the DOC's commissioner, who oversees state prisons, to discipline and fire DOC staff when they are found responsible for serious misconduct. Another bill would create a new independent office that would oversee corrections operations across the state. The third bill, that would allow the Correctional Association of New York to inspect a prison without any notice.
Since the death of Robert Brooks was revealed, there have been calls to close Marcy Correctional Facility.
Governor Hochul taking time to weigh in on the situation surrounding Brooks on the Newsmaker program from our sister station in Syracuse. Take a listen.
So I'm angry that it has taken this long now. We're still waiting for the indictments to come out, but I understand the district attorney here in Onondaga County is being thoughtful about it, and he has to work with the medical examiner. I understand that, but the community needs to know that there is a process where these people will be held accountable for what they did. What does closing it accomplish? I'm willing to listen to people on this, I truly am, but we also could make this be a model for prison reform that is nationally recognized. I'm willing to make the investments. I just need people to understand that this could also be a place where we can turn a tragedy into something that is more positive.
Joining us now to give additional insight on the push for corrections reform is Jennifer Scaife. She's the Executive Director for the Correctional Association of New York. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the Correctional Association of New York. What is it for people that don't know?
We are an independent oversight organization. We were founded in 1844, and we have special authority under the New York State correction law to provide oversight over all of the correctional facilities in New York State. We carry out monitoring visits, we interview incarcerated people, we speak with employees who work in the prisons, we gather data, issue reports and recommendations, and really seek to promote transparency that will help lead to positive change in the system and accountability for when things go wrong.
And I know you were recently in Albany. There was a press conference held about 3 pieces of legislation that could potentially have some reform in the prison system here in New York State. Can you talk about those bills, and do you think that this is going to be something that's beneficial?
You know, the 3 bills that were on the slate of bills announced by Senator Salazar earlier this week, I see as necessary first steps in creating an environment where subsequent change is possible. So the bill in particular that would strengthen the authority of the Correctional Association would give the organization authority powers that are comparable to other oversight entities, both in New York State and nationally. And in particular, we are really focused on the ability to receive additional data from the department without having to submit freedom of information requests asking for the data. And we see that as an important component both of transparency, but also the ability for the public then to understand what is happening inside correctional facilities and why might those things be happening. And then policymakers can use that data to make better informed bill recommendations. The governor's office is empowered to have a granular understanding of what's going on in the prisons. And family members of people who are incarcerated can look to our website and see what kind of conditions, problems, and opportunities exist at the facility where their loved one may be held. So that is one particular aspect of one of the bills that we think is fundamental for bringing about change and informing the public. Another bill that I would just focus on briefly is a bill that would grant the Commissioner of Docs the authority to bring termination proceedings against an employee. It's hard to imagine being the head of an agency and not being able to fire somebody who's done something wrong or carried out a criminal act. And currently, the collective bargaining agreement entitles corrections officers and security staff to an arbitration process where arbitrators may reinstate an employee even if that person did violate workplace rules. So we think this is just a common sense authority that the commissioner should have, and certainly there are other mechanisms for ensuring that employment practices are carried out fairly and in accordance with the law.
And I understand that for inspectors to go to a prison, they have to give prior notice, right?
That is something that is currently in our authorizing legislation. We are required to give the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision 72 hours notice prior to arriving at a correctional facility, and the bill that would strengthen the authority of this organization would remove that restriction such that we could, as legislators are empowered by law to do, arrive at a facility unannounced and be granted access.
So besides these 3 pieces of legislation, what else do you think needs to be done in order to have prison reform?
Well, we have a long list of recommendations. We published them earlier in the month, 24 recommendations for improving organizational culture and safety inside correctional facilities. And as you might imagine, there is no quick fix to the reforms that are being called for. And many of the issues that we've identified are interconnected. In other words, in order to solve a bigger problem like violence, you have to address a number of different things almost simultaneously. And so, we have some simple recommendations like recognize good conduct and excellence, both among incarcerated individuals and staff. And then we have some trickier recommendations like modernize record-keeping systems, which, as you might imagine, is a massive undertaking for a $3+ billion agency with 42 correctional facilities and nearly 30,000 staff. So really the opportunities run the gamut from very ground level change to big ticket items. And we think that the governor has made an important step by announcing the corrective actions that she did at the end of December to bring in an external law firm to carry out an investigation and to engage external organizations that are focused on culture change inside prisons that really look at ways to understand the needs and challenges that both incarcerated people and staff are facing and bring those important stakeholder groups together to collaboratively solve problems and also to recognize one another's humanity. So these are just some of the things that we think are important, and we will be closely watching the system and reporting publicly as the reforms are implemented.
Definitely something that we'll be watching too. Thank you so much, Jennifer Skiff, for coming here.
Thank you.
A federal funding freeze could have a significant impact for residents in New York. When we return, while the planned freeze isn't happening right now, hear from the governor on how she'll be directing the state during this potentially tumultuous season in Washington. If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X at WTEN.
Welcome back. A confusing back and forth between Washington and New York this week. A federal judge putting a temporary stop to a memo from President Trump that would have frozen federal grants and loans.
Early on Wednesday, the Trump administration sent out a memo rescinding the directive that looked into pausing loans, grants, and foreign aid. Still, several lawmakers are sending out warnings about the policy, saying it would have negative financial impacts for the state. While the memo has been rescinded, the Trump administration says that the executive orders designed to reduce government spending will remain in effect.
Governor Hochul reacting to all of this back and forth on the Newsmaker program from our sister station in Syracuse. Let's take a listen.
Yes, it sounds alarming, but let me get all the facts, and I'll have a strategy to deal with it. We're not going to have hair on fire moments all day long. I have to work on affordability, public safety, mental health, health care overall, and protecting the people of our state. So we're closely watching what's happening in Washington. I have teams that are ready to work with the Attorney General, file lawsuits, and we'll get out there and shout when we have to shout if it'll make a difference. But otherwise, we need to govern responsibly and not panic every single time something is issued out of Washington, because otherwise it's going to be a long 4 years.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit.
If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X at WTEN.
Finally, at Empire State Weekly, health officials issuing a new warning today over the spread of the bird flu. The virus has now been detected in multiple New York counties.
In Ulster County, over 40 ducks and chickens died. 2 birds left alive had to be euthanized. As a precaution, milk and dairy cattle are also being tested for a potential outbreak. There have also been other positive cases in both Suffolk and Putnam counties.
Now, so far, no human cases have been reported, and the risk to humans from the bird flu is very low. Next week, we'll look to hear from the state health department on the steps they are taking now to stop the spread of that disease. But for now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. We'll see you here next week.
Don't you forget, you can watch this show, Empire State Weekly, all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of the show on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.